welcome to the late April update of Elvenhome. Plenty of time to spend working on the layout, and I found myself doing one thing that I expected to do for this video, but doing something other for reasons that will become clear a bit in the next clip. Very grateful for all the comments I had in the last video. They're always very helpful, and not least about things that I forget. Client Castle Steam asked me a simple question of would there be an inspection pit at the engine shed that will be up at High Elven, and I'd completely forgotten about putting an engine shed, an inspection pit in, so that now is going to be added to the design, because there would most definitely have to be an inspection pit at the engine shed. I'm pretty certain of that, given the loco's stable up there most of its working life. So let's move on to the next section, which came about partly through my incompetence of being able properly to order things on the internet. I'll speak to you again at the end. Well, you join me on the desktop here for my Kit Bash challenge. In response to my last video, Mark Island gave me a couple of very useful comments concerning the proposed layout of the station. Now, you may recall that what I originally had in mind was to put a train shed and to have the locomotive come in this direction with obviously the auto coach sitting behind it, and that the train shed would come across here with the locomotive outside, so that it didn't fill the train shed with smoke. That was my intended way of doing things, but Mark Island suggested that in fact it was likely that the service would be operated pushing the auto coach up the hill, on the basis that on the way down, if the coach were to become uncoupled from the train, you wouldn't have a runaway coach, because of course most of the braking of this coach is provided from the locomotive, which means that they would operate this way around. Now, the water crane was meant to be there for the locomotive, would have to come up here, and that meant that I would have to adjust the position of the train shed. And in fact, what this brings you closer to is the kinds of train sheds that are found both at Wick and at Thurso on the far north line, and of course big train sheds. The big terminus stations in London all run into train sheds. Well, not Euston, it runs into a underground car park essentially, but Paddington, King's Cross, St Pancras, Charing Cross, all of those run into traditional train sheds, and that got me thinking a bit about how I would design things. Separately, I mentioned in the last video that I'd ordered the new Settle and Carlisle version of a good shed by Metcalfe, and it duly arrived, except I had ordered the wrong thing. And what duly arrived was in fact a stone engine shed, which wasn't what I wanted at all, and I thought, oh well, I'll put that to one side. There's nothing much I can do, until a thought struck me, which is, this is a shed, and could it be kit bashed to turn into my train shed with a station building on the side? And so today's challenge, which I'm just about to embark upon, is to start building the station building for the to go on the side of the engine shed, and start thinking about how I'm going to build all that and tie it all in. So just to give you a very quick look, you'll recognize this in broad layout. This is the more modern version of the engine shed, which I used and converted by putting brick papers over to one in the red brick kind. I think if I hack this about a bit, we can put this as a side building on the side of the main engine shed. Bring the picture of the engine shed in here. Probably cutting it by about a half for each ends for the depth, and then using these outer halves by extending the length of this bit to create my station building. And obviously that would allow me to use the bits from the kit. So I am about to embark upon that, and we'll see how it turns out. once I've completed this part of it. I think this is going to work quite well because the length of the platform that I've built will be fine. There will be another end piece of platform, obviously to provide the end of the line, which puts a buffer here for the end of the line. And then if I put these two together, the engine shed will cover to just up about there, which will be just about right, I think, which means my water crane can be here. This is outside the shed and everything is hunky-dory. But we'll see. The first thing to do is to see if I can turn this engine, what's it actually called? Can't remember now. Workshop. This workshop into a side station building. Now I'm not going to show you because I've got to start thinking. I've got to do a bit of thinking and working at the same time, and thinking, working and videoing can only end in tears. So what I'll do is I'll come back when I've finished working on this to show you how I've adapted it before I go on to start constructing the engine shed as a train shed for the station, because it too will need adaptation. It's got some wonderful big windows which will only run down one side completely. That which will, I think the platform is going to go onto here, onto this side. That's where the platform will go in, with the station building on the opposite side. Maybe. Yes, it will. And then these big windows will provide good access to the view in, because I do intend to try and put some lights in this so we can see the locomotive or the auto coach in its platform. So I'll come back when I've finished doing that, which could be a few hours, it could be a few days. We'll have to wait and see. I'll speak to you again when I've completed that work. Here we are later the same day, and I've completed this to my satisfaction. It's surprising how much time this takes, because there doesn't appear to me to be much work in this at all, but it's taken me most of the day to complete it. And this is, I assure you, the bulk of it is the workshop kit. If I lift it up here, this is the workshop building. That would have been the back wall, that would have been the back wall, that would have been the front wall with the big engine room door. What I was able to do was to cut down one end, so that has been cut off and stuck onto there, and then on the other end to cut one that has a door in. That then has been mounted. If I turn it upside down, oops, careful. If I turn it upside down, this is just a basic part of the platform kit, and this is how you construct Metcalfe platforms essentially. So that provides the floor onto which the building has been mounted, and that of course sits at the same height as the platform, which will be sitting inside the what will now be the train shed. I had some of these plastruct stairs and railings separate, so I made up a little set of stairs to go up to that door. The main door needed a set of stairs to take it up, and that is nothing more than the brown card, this stuff. I cut a 1 centimetre strip, and then cut the steps that I needed, and each step is 1 millimetre or so less than the previous, 2 millimetres less than the previous. So that gives me a 6-inch rise and a 1 foot going up the stairs, which takes it quite reasonably. There's no ramp for those of you who are used to modern stations. The railways obviously expected only the able-bodied to be able to travel. I've no doubt if this station was in use today, a whole ramp would have been built up the other side. That will sit on the shed at the back, on the side of the shed, and at that point I'll put a roof on, and I've used the inner linings from this kit, which I've cut in half, to provide me with 2 other supports to support the roof when that goes on, and that will just be a half roof butting up to the shed once I've worked on that. So the next thing for me to do is to start building the main shed and to see how that will come out, and how I'm going to adapt the side of that to provide access from here. I'm not going to bother lighting any of this because this is going to be on the back. As you look at it when the train comes in, that's what you'll have the train shed in front. So there's really no point doing much more to that at the moment than sticking it on the model. And then I'll see what I want to do by way of inner decoration on the train shed, which I think is the more important. And certainly possibly trying to think about putting a bookseller or something on the platform. Although it's a little branch terminus, would they have one? Not entirely sure. But that's it for now. And what I'll do now is go off and make the train shed. And once I've made most of it, the bit that I won't make up is the wall which will connect to here, because I'll need to think about how those things go together. And this will probably be in the next video, because I'm pretty conscious that I've taken up about 10 minutes or so in this video, and there will be other things that I'll want to use to fill the time. So you'll see the second part of this in the next video, and I'll speak to you about that then. You'll recall in the last video that I mentioned and showed this ash pit, which Chris Inge very kindly sent to me to put on my layout, because he didn't now need it on his own N-gauge layout. And I've started the process of installing the ash pit on the layout, and this morning's work is to put some power into a piece of track which will actually attach at the back here. And also to put in and wire up the two points here. But just to show you what I've done so far, the ash pit, I struggled a bit to get the rails to stick to the plastic, not for any difficulty of glue particularly, but with the code 55 track, the webbing just wasn't strong enough to hold it engaged when you cut this much of a gap out of the center. And actually it's quite hard to cut a gap out of the center of FlexiTrack. But I had in my unused track box the original Farish track that came with the first set that I bought, that had the SD and JR Ginty as a Coltrane. And that worked much better because it was much easier to cut the webbing out of the center without removing it from the ends. It's almost impossible to do that with code 55 track because the track is set down into the sleepers. That then gave me something that kept engaged rather better, and I was able, using two-part epoxy glue, to bond the rails to the plastic rails that sit underneath that would have supported them in real life. The only potential problem that gives you, of course, is that if I bring this here, you'll see the code 55 track here. The sleepers, obviously the track is embedded in the sleepers, so the depths are different. But I'm pleased to say that my incompetence has come to my rescue, because the exact heights between this part, okay, put you in focus again, there we go, this part and the board, this is the edge of the board under which all the points sit, was not perfect when I did this. And rather helpfully, the gap is more or less, not quite, the right distance to make that a fairly even road across. This does rise anyway as it comes up to the Pico turntables, because there's a slight lip here. I've not tried to sink this right down because obviously it would go right through. So I need the lip to hold the turntable in place. So what that has done is meant that I don't have a problem of the different heights. I think there is a track piece you can get to help convert from what would be code 80 track to code 55, but I just don't need to do that. What I'm now going to do is fit this in finally, wire up the end track and the power will come in from the end, and put these two pieces in. And then hopefully the next thing you will see, I hope, is a train coming off the turntable and going on to the ash pit, ready to be to drop its fire and have the smoke box cleaned. So I'll come back once I've completed that bit of work, and we'll see if we can get this to work. Well, as you can see, the first locomotive has come off the turntable and is waiting for the smoke box to be cleared before it pulls forward to drop the fire. Really, really grateful to Chris for the donation of the ash pit. Chris has his own channel about his own N-gauge model layout, which is a recreation of Tetbury and Cirencester stations. And his channel is Wheezy Palace N-gauge. Be really worth going and having a look. He hasn't put many videos up recently, but he's going to be returning to doing that, and he'll be able to tell you more about his channel and how it come to have its name and the design and what have you over the coming months. So please do go and have a look. I will try and put a link to his channel as a card in the YouTube video, but when I've tried to do that before to other channels, it sometimes doesn't like me doing it, but I will put a link down in the description below the video so you can go and have a look at his channel and another N-gauge layout, and there aren't that many of us actually on YouTube. So that's really grateful to Chris. Now just to pass on to the closing part of the video, and I'll come back and talk to you in just a minute. Well, I hope you enjoyed this edition of Elvenhome. As I said, it wasn't what I expected to be showing you, except for the putting in of the ash pit. I'm really pleased with that ash pit. It looks beautiful, and I'm really pleased to have it in on the layout. And again, thanks to Chris. And please do go and have a look at his channel. The next thing for me to do is to get on and complete the station, and I can see the build waiting for me. So you'll see the completion of that in the next video. And then perhaps also to start thinking about some track laying at High Elven, although I need to get one or two pieces before I can do that. Not track, helpfully, given that Pico now has closed their works for the time being. So if you've enjoyed the video, please do give it a thumbs up, and if you've got any comments, well, please do let me have them. As you'll have seen, they're incredibly useful to me and have helped in the development of Elvenhome. If you've not subscribed, well, please do subscribe. I'm grateful to all my new subscribers. Quite a few have come on board in the last few weeks, and it's good to have you along. And if you've hit the bell notification, you'll know when I'm uploading my videos. But until I speak to you again, please do keep yourself safe, keep yourself at home, and I'll speak to you again in about a fortnight's time. Until then, that's bye-bye from me. Bye-bye.